On my right is, on my immediate right, is Gillian Wess, who is the CEO of Facilities Management Association of New Zealand. Very big hand for Gillian, please. Next to Gillian is John Mauro, who's Chief Sustainability Officer of Auckland Council. Big hand for John, please. Thank you. And next to John is Bint, who's the Sustainable Business, Building Scientist at BRANZ. A big hand for her, please. And on my far right, Connal Townsend, who you met earlier, of course, is the CEO of the Property Council of New Zealand. Big hand for Connal, please. And then a man you've already seen a fair amount of today, quite rightly, Andrew Eagles, CEO of the Green Building Council. I will just very briefly explain who I am so you get some idea of where my questions are going to come from. I am a business journalist and have been for a very long time. I've never been more excited about the field as I am now. It's very clear to me that absolutely mainstream are these days about business are these issues of deep sustainability, because that's where all the very good, innovative, forward-looking companies are around the world, and economies. But on a personal nature, my family and I embarked 7 years ago on a project to turn our house into a positive energy house. So this is a house that now generates more electricity than it uses. That was a 3-year project that we finished 4 years ago. And we cut the energy consumption of the house from 15,000 kilowatt hours equivalent, that was gas and electricity, down to 4,500. But we got 6,000 kilowatt hours of electricity off PV panels on the roof. This is a 74-year-old house, and it has all those great benefits of being drier, warmer, more beautiful than it even was all those years ago. And we use the surplus electricity to drive an EV and a plug-in hybrid. Not quite enough electricity from on the roof to drive that, so we do buy in some electricity. But I've got all the data on what that costs to do and what the astonishing benefits are in terms of operating cost for the house now, and an EV and a PHEV versus 2 V6s. This is my meat and potatoes. Our topic was, for our discussion, is the sustainable revolution. How do we make it happen? And I'm just going to start with this quote from the Productivity Commission, from their Low Emissions Economy issues paper out in August of last year. Just actually hands up, any organizations in the room or representatives of organizations in the room made a submission to the Productivity Commission on that. Oh, you're in a real minority in one sense. There's a wealth of material there from all sorts of companies. But here's the quote from that issues paper, which I think very neatly encapsulates what extraordinarily exciting things are going on. The shift from the old economy to a new low emissions economy will be profound and widespread, transforming land use, the energy system, production methods and technology, regulatory frameworks and institutions, and business and political culture. And I think it's that last phrase which is the most telling, because this won't happen until we get a change in business and political culture. And clearly what we're hearing this morning from all our presentations is how powerful the drivers are of this, which are changing the business culture in how we build and operate buildings. I asked each of the panelists to define for themselves what the word sustainable means to them, either professionally or personally. Because it's one of those words that we use very widely, but it's like democracy. We kind of know what we feel we want from a good democracy, but we're not quite sure how to measure it. So I'm just going to go straight down the line here, starting with Gillian first, for her definition, personal or professional or both, about what does sustainability mean to you. So, Gillian.
Thank you, Rod. Kia ora toto. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you very much to the Green Building Council for organising this wonderful forum today. So to start with, personally, sustainability at a personal level is about my responsibility to both the social environment and to the ecological environment, and the contribution that I can personally make to that for community well-being. On a professional level, I lead an organisation of facilities managers who you will find at least one, if not whole teams of our members in each of the 41,000 buildings that we've heard about today. And each of those people has a professional responsibility regarding sustainability in the ways in which those buildings operate, and the need to have the knowledge and the know-how and the experience and the expertise to create living and working spaces, those collective spaces where our people come together to be productive and to ensure that well-being and that health and safety and productivity. So it's really very heartening today to understand the role that facilities management is, how it is being recognised in this new performance-driven tool, and the role that our people can play in that.
Fine. Thank you very much indeed, Gillian. John.
Keota tato. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to NZGBC and all of you. I'll try to keep it simple. Maybe I'll over-answer the question a tiny bit, and I'll say that there's at least, at the most simple professional sense, it's simply better for all forever. That's how I've been saying it. Interpret that as you will. Personally, I feel like for me, it's got to be fun. It's a big, we all like challenges. We wouldn't be in this room if we didn't. But it's got to be fun and beautiful and joyful along the way, not to insert too many colorful words, but it really does, to keep our attention, because we need our own resilience to continue through. And then in the built environment, you know, to achieve a world-class built environment, we need to think about, I guess my vision for that would be thinking about how we can create a quality, resilient, and maybe restorative built environment that actually nurtures our prosperity, our productivity, and our potential. So, a few definitions.
Fabulous, thank you. Oh, sorry, I was going to go to Lee next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
So at a personal level, I would say...
Sorry, it actually may not go.
Sorry, at a personal level, sustainability to me is something that has a future forecast view, and that is always positive. So you're always taking a step forward as opposed to taking a step back. In the building industry, I think we have such a diverse range of businesses, individuals, in a mega industry sense, that we have so many different skill sets and views. To me, sustainability is leaving nobody behind, so encapsulating that from both the bottom up in terms of having all of the individuals thinking socially, environmentally and economically, and then from the top down, so bringing through the regulators and the businesses and the sectors.
Fine. Thank you very much indeed. Connal.
Yes, it is this time. From a business point of view, the role of the Property Council is fundamentally to act as, well, one of our roles is to act as shameless cheerleaders for the New Zealand Green Building Council. And we do that with some pride. We think this is a very important organisation, and we're particularly thrilled about the performance tool. In broader sense, there's a whole lot of other things around CO2 emissions that come from demolishing buildings where we're not repurposing buildings. We're interested in public transport and fostering the adoption of public transport. We're interested in adopting or encouraging a whole of life kind of view in terms of asset management, and not thinking about short-term initial capital costs of putting assets in place, and trying to avoid breathtaking decisions like New Zealand Rail deciding to get rid of electric trains and move forward to the 19th century and reintroduce diesel. I mean, hello. Stunning stuff like that. There's a role, at least, to say, if you frame it in terms of whole of life, there's something that can be done. As a transition into my own, just from that and into my own thoughts, the other day I was at a workshop with a group of other like-minded organisations thinking about the future of the planning regime, and the RMA in particular, hosted in this case by Environmental Defence Society, who we have, interestingly, a very close and affectionate working relationship with. And you might think, representing commercial property owners and investors, what we'd be mixing around with a bunch of greenies. They're bloody good people, and they think hard and deep. And one of the issues, thinking about the future of the RMA, they posed was thinking about very deep ecology. Is there a reciprocal ethical relationship with the natural environment? And indeed, should I have a reciprocal ethical relationship with, for example, trees? Now, I have a curse of having an MA in political philosophy, and trained in philosophy, the idea of reciprocal ethical relationships with inanimate objects is one that I really cudgel my brains about. And I was trained in concepts of meta-ethics and emotivism, and a philosopher, A.J. Ehrer, who proposed what he called the hurrah-boo theory, which was to make any statement that something looking after future generations was good is as fatuous a statement as saying, boo, hurrah. Well, yeah, maybe, and he might be right, but I don't care. So privately, I just worry about wasting power. I wish I had photovoltaic cells on my roof. I wish I was doing more rainwater harvesting, and I should make more of an effort.
Thank you very much. Andrew.
Oh, there's been a lot of great things said. I think, for me, I know from the Property Council's work that the property and construction sector is one of the largest sectors in New Zealand, and we need to shout about that, and we need to shout about what we can do to help take this forward. I'm really taken by the effort that's gone in to create a measure around this. So I'm interested in terms of sustainability, creating a measure that works for what we need, but also people, and then measuring and improving on that, improving that measurement over time, making it public, and I think you can see some quite significant improvements over time when people are driven to measure and make their improvements transparent.
Thank you very much indeed to all of you, because those are hard questions to answer, and I very much appreciated the wide range of answers from the practical to the philosophical, which is all very important. So a big hand for our panellists, please. Having put them to that test, it's only fair that I should answer the question myself. And for many years, I've given very earnest answers. But it occurred to me recently there's a simpler one. Some decades from now, I hope it'll be some decades from now, at the end of my life, will I be looking forward to coming back for a second life? Now, this is a hypothetical because I'm an Anglican, not a Buddhist. But should I come back, would I want to come back? So that, for me, is the benchmark, personally, as to what sustainability means, and whether we have got to the point where 10 billion or so people are living very well on a regenerating planet. Back to more practical questions. So the first one is this, and open to all of you. Do you think that if we pick up on the very interesting, one of the very interesting ideas from Ross from KPMG this morning about that analysis of Volvo, about the true cost of ownership and operation, do you believe that Green Star performance will help drive building owners towards that true cost and benefit of ownership and operation? Yes, please.
I truly hope so. And I just mentioned before a whole of life kind of worldview, which I think is very much related to that true cost idea of taking in other things that ordinarily ruled out as externalities and putting it into the maths and weighing the whole thing up. Particularly in the procurement world, not adopting a whole of life kind of view. And we're reminded even of, the 10-100 kind of ratio thing. That, it's so easy to procure, I'm going to build a new building, it's going to cost X, I've got to keep my capital budget under control, I'll try and screw the cost down, I'll do cheap and dirty, without realising that the maintenance costs stretched out of the lifetime of that asset are so much greater and not taken on board or factored in. I can't be sure that the performance tool is going to solve this, but one reason why I'm so excited about it is it's going to give us a tool that might get that paradigm shift working where more of a whole of life view is taken around assets. That is one of the things that really excites me about what's happening today.
Thanks. John?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll get us all to do a gesture, because I think this is kind of a, this is in this category. It's quite simple. I just made it up. You kind of go like this. What performance will actually help us do is this, which is stop doing the dumb stuff first. Second is grab hold of the wheel, or bike, whatever it might be, and actually have the courage to pull ourselves in a totally different direction. And that's what that information can help us do. So I want us to, and it's totally cheesy, but it's almost lunchtime, put your hand out and say, well, stop doing the dumb stuff. It's almost like a commitment. We'll grab the wheel, because everybody in this room has a potential to do something about it, and steer ourselves in the right direction. And thank you, Green Star Performance.
Thank you. I feel an action song coming on, but I'll save you
Look out, Rod,
my
look out.
singing. But there is a great simplicity and power in that. Lee?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for the industry has been around the quantification of things like Green Star design for the base build. So I think I see a real value in the Green Star performance actually feeding back in that cycle to demonstrate the importance of it.
Okay, thank you. Gillian, thanks.
Well, yes, again, if we take a strategic overview of facilities operations, it's so important that once we get through our design and our planning and our strategic planning, that we do have an effective performance measurement tool, and this is what the Green Star Performance does provide. So we can at last have a practical measurement through which we can measure our effectiveness, and hooray for that. It's really a great step forward.
Thank you. I'm going to, in a sense, pick up on the third question there on Slido, which says what top-down efforts mentioned by Lee are going to gaining ground towards regulatory mandates for green building practice becoming standard. In essence, I'm getting that question because what I was about to ask is, do we need, and how will we achieve, a true cost on carbon and substantially more demanding building codes that actually require people to do the right thing, or at least the better thing? Do we need those two things, and are we going to get them? Which I think is, in essence, gets to the heart of that question.
I want to get my answer in before Connal does. So good question, and actually I think the tilt from the built environment, meaning a building, to larger, I mean, I think the question you just asked, Rod, really tilts us toward thinking about what's the true cost of our development pattern, all the infrastructure we put in, all the services we provide, and the big picture. And I guess I'd just offer that we need to think outside the box. I know it's kind of cheesy to say that, but I've done it before. Think outside the box, think outside the building, and to all of the things it's connected to. So I think the easy answer is yes. When we hear about the need for a look at our building code, that's something we've advocated for. It's in our Productivity Commission submission that was endorsed by some of the folks in this room, including Councillor Wayne Walker in the back, and Penny Hulse, who was here with you this morning. That's paramount, because some of that stuff is so long in the past that forget sustainability, even just practical matters in the building code are outdated because we live in a different world since then. We look at other countries, other cities around the world, they have an expectation for where we need to go. It's set in the UK. I know we've heard a lot recently about the Climate Commission, and we've heard a lot about us sizing up what that looks like for New Zealand. Something like that will give us a predictable cost on carbon, will allow a predictable path forward for businesses to gain competitive edge, incorporate that true cost into how they do business, and move us forward.
Thank you. Do I sense a different view from Connal? John was sort of setting that up.
I quite like that. I think the Property Council's position is somewhat nuanced on this. We have a difficulty with poorly constructed regulatory responses from a local and central government response, like, oh, I know, let's make Green Star rating compulsory in the draft unitary plan. And then when you actually ask the question, how many new office offerings that meet your criteria have not gone to the Green Building Council for rating? And the answer is none. You demonstrably do not have a market failure. You actually have some sort of facile, make politicians feel good thing, and there's no need to act. But we have a major regulatory issue. We're incredibly risk averse in this nation. councils can't help but try and obstruct the development of new buildings because they are left carrying the parcel at the end of the day in terms of risk and in terms of liability. And we're never going to be able to, for example, deal to our housing crisis unless we can free that up. The last government thought, oh, I know, it's a lack of skills in the building trade. We'll introduce a licensed building practitioners regime. Well, yeah, good, skills need to be lifted, but have they actually identified the problem? If we had an external system of insurance or guarantors entering the market, and there are plenty of insurance companies would do this and say, we'll step in, we'll absorb the risk, but they look at our building systems and our building products, and which there's no transparency in at all, they're not going to enter the market and provide any sort of assurance or guarantee at all. So I am completely open for a national debate about greatly improved regulatory responses to improve the quality of building systems and building products. And to the extent that involves sustainability, I'm all up for that sort of debate as well.
Thanks. Any other takers on that question of higher cost of carbon, higher codes?
Oh, just to note, so we are seeing some people lead at the moment. So we're seeing, we're seeing finance come to the party and wanting to signal that better buildings are what they want to invest in. So we're getting calls from investors asking us about the neighbours' performance of buildings. We're seeing owners, Panuku Development Auckland, have committed to 10,000 homes at Homestar, as has Tamaki Regeneration Company. All of their social homes will be built to Homestar. So we're seeing some leadership. I think in the bigger picture, you'll see the Productivity Commission come back and say, in the next 6 months of the new year, here's some potential routes, regulatory or otherwise, to encourage buy-in. I think we do things a bit simply. We could look at ways, and I know John's looking at this, and how we could incentivise and give reward for better buildings and better homes, say faster building consent or lower rates, or lower development contributions, which some councils do. But I think that ideally what we need to do is have a grown-up conversation about our trajectory for the building code and where we want to be. So what does that look like? It looks like us as a country, us as the building sector saying, well, where should we be, our new buildings be from 2025? Is that, and that allows everyone to gear up. We did this in the UK, it's happened in Australia. When do we want to get to zero carbon with our existing buildings and actually have that grown-up conversation? And that allows a discussion, it allows a trajectory for the improvement of thermal bridging and air pressure testing and all those sorts of things. It allows Temperzone to gear up their products and allows us to look at how we can meet the Zero Carbon Act, because it's coming. And it starts to point to what we can deliver as a sector and where we want to be.
If I may ask a question on that, though, is 2025 a feasible timeline or goal for that, given that by 2030 we have to achieve a significant reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions in New Zealand, and at the moment they're still going up. And so if we only finally agree by 2025 on what these buildings should look like, that's not going to have much impact by 2030.
Yeah, so I think, and Lee, I'd love your thoughts on this. So I pulled that date out as an indicator of how we could think about the trajectory. Now, actually, when we've had a show, and I'd like to do it here, do people think that the new build standards should be at zero carbon for new buildings? But when do you think that should be? Who thinks it should be 2025? Okay. Who thinks it should be earlier?
Oh, no, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Let's have a Dutch auction here. So, yeah. So we're down to hands up 2020. No, sorry, keep going. Keep going. So that's
so that's kind of my point. It's not so much I'm saying it should be 2025. I think there's a deep analysis of work that needs to be done to work through when and how much, but also we as a sector need to say when is right, when can we achieve that, when can products and suppliers gear up, have we got enough skills, let's jump on some of those skills visas. But Leah, what are your thoughts? I know you've done a lot of thinking around.
Yes, I was about to turn to you because you're on top of the technology here. So tell us how it's looking.
Great, no pressure. So I don't know how many of you in the room attended, but there was an event recently hosted by Vector and the Sustainable Business Council with Will Stephen from the Australian National University. They're forecasting on climate change, so that said we essentially have 3 years to get our shit together, and we only have 22 years before we're actually at that tipping point of no return. So I think, in response to Andrew, I think yes, sooner is better. We need to act faster on the regulatory sense. At the same time, there is this little niggle of the vicious circle of blame that's been in the industry since about 1994 was when it was first published. And that essentially says developers want environmentally friendly buildings, but the investors won't pay for it, and the investors want them, but the occupants aren't asking for them. And the occupants are asking for them, but the builders won't build them. And then so it just keeps going round and round in circles. So how can we actually act as an industry, empower individual actions to break and disrupt that circle of blame? Because we shouldn't be blaming, we should be taking the onus on ourselves to actually do something.
Thank you. Any further comments on...
that's a really great point. And we see that. I went to speak to some architects in Hamilton, and I finished speaking, and they said, oh, but if only someone would talk to the people who are commissioning the work to encourage them to do sustainability. And I had just spoken to 30 architects. I'm really puzzled by this. And then I speak to developers, and they say, oh, our engineers and our consultants said, not to build. They encouraged us not to build to Green Start, despite the fact that we wanted to. You're one of our members. Wow, amazing. So you've got people out there who have done our training course who aren't even mentioning it to people, or they're discouraging it. So I do find it is an interesting element. And I think partly we have taken that on. We feel that perhaps we need to do a better job. So we are gearing up to provide a wider range of materials, so slides, and videos, and a value case for green building, updated, and we'll be launching that in the first 4 months of next year to kind of harness people up. But I like Lee's point around it's about all of us challenging at each stage and driving change.
If I could just go back to Lee to draw on your expertise. Very broadly speaking, as you're looking at the technology of products that are available now in the building sector, is there a reasonable range of products and technology that can be retrofitted or adopted in renovations of buildings that could actually significantly lift the performance in economical ways?
I think it's not a simple answer, and I think if you go back to some of the Temper Zone presentation earlier, it's not just about the product alone, it's about how it fits into the building, how it's operated, how it interacts with other components and technologies within the building. At one of my recent presentations, somebody in the audience challenged me to say, why aren't brands specifically creating a platform for green appraisals or low carbon products, so that there is a platform to market and identify these products. At the moment, I don't know.
I was going to go meta, Rod, just
yes,
with two kind of almost existential and hypothetical questions. I mean, one, do we have a choice? The landscape's changed the last couple of years where internationally we're bound to an agreement here, and maybe even nationally our ambitions are going to get much more interesting over the course of the next year or two, and we'll have a sector-based target most likely. So carbon budget, there's kind of no avoiding the numbers there, so we want to get ahead of that, I think. And then the other is, do we have a heart? And I think, it's probably been well covered today, but when we're looking at the second highest rate of asthma in the world in our country, and we're looking at deplorable, appalling, and embarrassing conditions in our very city, why can't we do something about that quick?
Yes, and certainly from Brendan's presentation at the end there about the work Becca's doing in Singapore, it's startling to think that the island nation of Singapore, which is an intensely built environment, could be more sustainable than New Zealand is. I mean, that's the competition. So, and it's quite startling to think about in a competitive nation sense, that juxtaposition.
Yeah, well, really. And 27 countries of the EU will be building to nearly zero energy buildings, nearly zero energy homes from 2021. Just to touch on whether the technology is available, just some useful case studies. One that John led on, 135 Albert Street, now saving $300,000 a year of taxpayers' money. Awesome. Te Puni Kōkiri in Wellington, neighbours assessment, some improvements, thanks to is Satish here? Satish, brilliant leadership at Argosy. They're now saving $80,000 a year of taxpayers' money. So some of the stuff, you might say, is it very challenging? Well, let's just measure and improve. You get significant improvements from the very technologies that David Staker has talked through. It's there for the taking.
Thanks. Can I just try this question on you? What I'm feeling at the moment, sorry, this is just a sort of personal view as to where the discussion's going. It's about incremental change, albeit hopefully accelerating. And my question is incremental change enough? Or do we actually need to take some quite radical leaps in the way we repurpose and renovate and use existing buildings, but it also, of course, our new builds as well. So incremental versus radical.
Can I have a shot at that? There should always be a mix of kind of the old Kaizen and incremental bites. That's always going to be the long, sustainable way of getting improvement. But there probably is an urgent need now for some kind of real rough, sharp bend lift. Repurposing buildings is quite often, but not always, a more initially expensive option than just demo rebuild. The fact that you've then got a whole lot of fill that goes to a landfill with all the CO2 emissions and all that sort of stuff, this is back to the true value argument. That's not viewed. The long-term, again, that whole-of-life thing is often not taken as a view. So we've got a big attitudinal change to get round. And I'm very optimistic, but I come back to that point about, and to use the jargon, asymmetric distribution of risk down the value chain. City councils are left holding the package. They are right to be viscerally afraid of any new product or any new initiative because it might be leaky buildings again. And it was billions of dollars, and that remains the elephant in the room. That's the fear. And if they're the ones who are going to have to pay out from ratepayers' money, we have got to snap out of that and find some way to allocate risk down that value chain in a fairer way. Until we can deal to that problem, we can't do any sharp pen change here. We're going to have to keep on gnawing away and keeping the flag flying, but we're not going to get any radical change because they're right to be nervous. They're paying a lot of money out. As the same thing happened in British Columbia, same thing to some extent happened in Washington State, Seattle, Portland, those kind of climates. That's the fear, and they're right to be afraid.
Thanks. I'm just going to forewarn the panelists, this is going to be the last question. I'll give you a moment to think about it. In terms of, you represent 5 really important organisations driving this change. So in terms of your own organisation, what do you think is the biggest single attribute or driver that you've got your hands on to bring about this big transformation in buildings? So whilst you're having a quick think about that, and I'll go down the line starting with Andrew at that end. But I will just pick up a question that was there. Oh, it's disappeared. Was, are we walking the talk by having a low-carbon lunch? And I won't put Joanna on the spot on that, but you will make your own assessment as you have your lunch about that in a moment. So we've only got a few minutes left. So starting with Andrew, the biggest single driver you've got to really make this stuff hum.
Okay, I've got the third dance move in John's Green Star performance jig. So we went out, we went to the side. So I would like to see a show of hands as to who thinks neighbours should be mandatory by mid-2019 for all office buildings. Okay, I was going to finish that. I was just going to say for all office buildings above 1,200 square metres. So, you know, that's... Yeah, so Connal says yes. And so we'll just do the show of hands again. First of all, you went like that and that. So show of hands, who thinks that should be compulsory for... Okay, great. Good to see your hand up, Drew.
Connal.
That was a personal view. My board would have a problem probably, but no, I see no problem with it. Neighbours is a great initiative. Look, I think the best thing the commercial property world can do is to keep working on that continuous improvement and remorselessly keep on driving the message and spreading the word. The other thing I think that my organisation's got to do is actually clear away the big roadblock in terms of the perverse allocation of risk, because we're never going to meet those targets as long as that risk issue remains untackled. We get rid of that, it's like, you know, clearing the stables and from Greek myth, you know, suddenly the water rushes through, we're moving again.
Thanks. Lee.
So for BRANZ, we're the Building Research Association, we are just embarking on a journey right now to understand our carbon profile for the building industry, what a pathway forwards may look like. And I think one of the biggest gaps right now is we have, you know, we're talking about all of this action and we're talking about all these great initiatives, but what does that actually mean when we've got the emissions trading scheme, when we've got all these other initiatives? What does that mean for a building and what does that mean for you in a quantifiable sense? So actually digesting some of that information and pushing it out into the industry, supporting government with evidence-based information to support the update of regulations and codes, and yeah, providing you the information that you're asking for.
Thanks. John.
Clearly, Auckland Council, I mean, we've been kind of touting our success at 135 Albert, which actually Adam Bentley, who's in the audience now at NZGBC, had a bit to do with when he was at council. You know, there are ways we could lead by example, but I think standard disclaimer, I work for Auckland Council. I don't represent necessarily all of Auckland Council views. And I think with a little bit off leash, I mean, there's no sort of sense of building a great zero carbon house in the wrong place. And I think we've been having that conversation as a community, but let's think about this as an integrated systems thing, where we're not just talking about buildings, we're talking about transport and energy and waste and the whole, and adapting to climate change, social inequalities, the whole big picture here. And therefore, I think the best way that council can lead is to set that expectation of what our spatial form looks like, because that is the determinant of most of those things. We tried to do that in the unitary plan. I think we did a pretty good job upzoning. It was the most historic upzoning in New Zealand history. That was a really good start, and we had the support of Connal and the Property Council on that. We tried to insert sustainable design provisions. We didn't have the support on that, so we tried to make it a bit of an all package. But I think that's the single thing we can do, and that'll come up again as a conversation. And I think we as a community need to be ready for that, to insert our voices to say the spatial form really matters.
Thank you. And Gillian.
Well, thank you. Yes, well, I think it's a leadership issue. It's an issue of values and influence, and how the recognition that sustainable buildings and their effect on the triple bottom line of social benefits, of environmental benefits, of economical benefits. And from the facilities management perspective, I'm very much aware of our economic value. We know that we contribute over $11 billion market value in facilities management, and that's a huge responsibility, 4% of GDP. So it's how we can instill knowledge sharing, how we can influence not just the operations of buildings, but how buildings are designed, and how we can enter into that conversation within the design and the planning of land and buildings, so that we can operate our buildings in a far more sustainable manner. So it's about engagement, it's about communication, and it's about, as industry as a whole, how we can participate in that.
Fine, thank you. And just if I chip into a personal view here, I'm very excited about Green Star Performance, because I think this is going to be huge for commercial buildings. At a personal level, I'm hugely excited about HomeFit, and I'd like to offer my family as crash test dummies for you for HomeFit. Boy, have I got data for you. Man, I've got data for you. Because as John said earlier on, why would you not want to do this? This is so exciting to do. Anyway, I'll calm down and have lunch. A very big hand, please, to Andrew, to Connal, to Lee, to John, and to Gillian. Thank you very much indeed.